Welcome to the Select Board meeting for Monday, February 3rd. We'll call to order at 6:35 p.m. We'll jump around a little bit. We'll start with review of the custodial position screening committee recommendation and potential appointment. Thank you for coming back on or staying.
Thank you. So November-ish, Jamie Wilson gave her notice that she was moving on. So we started the advertisement right away, early December. Ran for six times, I think. So we finally had one candidate. We had one that submitted online to Brian, but then rescinded it, pulled it back out. So we had another one fill out their application. We set up an interview, the screening committee, on January 22nd. Comes with a lot of experience. He's his current employer, he's been there 24, over 20 years, doing a lot of like work. Knows how to use like a lot of floor machines. Very familiar with all types of buildings, handicap bathrooms, working with people of all ages, from his present employer. Had a pretty decent interview. We're pretty impressed. Answered the questions as we were hoping, and it was unanimous through the three of us on the screening committee that he'd be a good candidate to put forward to you all. He is fully aware of the bloodborne pathogen that's required. It sounds like they did in-house training, not an actual certificate, but he is aware of it, knows that he has to do that. There's a couple of OSHA classes that he needs to do, the CPR, which we've been setting up with Deputy Chief Ryan Betters, to get him set up with the other two new employees also. So he is very aware that there's a lot of those things that he does need and is willing to do them.
Questions, comments, concerns from the board?
I don't have any concerns. My comments are the same from Superintendent McCrory. This candidate came with a lot of experience, a decade of custodial in a large setting. So I think that's very transferable into this location.
So the advertisement was advertised at $20.60 to $21.86, which it should be step 3, and I would highly recommend the $21.86 for starting. Unless you three feel different.
You recommend whatever you wish to. What'd you say it was, 2186?
Yep.
Yeah.
We step 3 of B, I believe it is.
I just noticed the box about a friend or relative, although there was wasn't marked either way, and there was some learning about us that way. Did that come up? Did they have someone that worked here that they know? I was just curious.
Yes.
It says on the app, it wasn't marked either way, so had my curiosity.
He's related to Chief Holst.
Gotcha. The hear about us had enough check boxes that it made me curious that the other one was blank. So I don't have any concerns either. Are we looking to do an interview, or does someone want to make a motion?
I'm not looking to do another interview. I don't think it's necessary. I'll make a motion, but I do want to ask, given the length of service that this individual had would you be inclined to entertain a step 4 instead of a step 3?
2252?
Yes. 2252.
I have no objections or reservations to that.
Same.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
So many
I
tabs
can only be
open.
hopeful we have tenure of that sort in our staff, so
Yeah.
that is a long time. You don't see that a lot these days. A lot of experience.
I'll make a motion to appoint Adam Barnes as a full-time benefited custodian with a 1-year probationary period pending successful completion of pre-employment query check and medical screening at a rate of grade B, step 4, in accordance with the Public Works compensation schedule, and with a start date on or before 2 weeks enough time, Glenn?
He had asked
For-
to give 2 weeks to his
Yeah.
present employer, and the time frame for ALU and Corey and the other stuff,
least 2 weeks.
it's at least 2 weeks, so.
Should we do the 24th?
I was going to say on or before the 24th of February, 2025.
I will second that.
Is that sufficient time, Glenn?
I think so, yeah. I'll reach out to him tomorrow.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tomorrow morning?
Thanks. Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank the crew for us. Please. Let's go to review and potential vote to renew the Tri-State Mutual Aid Agreement. Chief, come on up.
So basically, the president and the board of directors for Tri-State Mutual Aid, which is all encompassing of, I'm not right off the top of my tongue how many towns are involved in it, but it does involve towns from Massachusetts, mostly Franklin County, Hampshire County, a couple of them out in the Berkshire, and then New Hampshire, the lower sections of New Hampshire and Vermont. Years ago, all signed a mutual aid agreement to allow us to cross the state line borders much more easily than it would be normally. So that, I believe that agreement's been in existence for at least 50 years. It was originally signed by the boards, and it still moves forward. So anyways, there were some things that changed. The dispatch center changed. A lot of the wording in the old one referred to the county dispatch, the county dispatch. So that cleaned up some of that language, but it hadn't been reviewed in a long time, so they cleaned it up. I do know that there were some questions from the legal team that I do not have any answers to at this point in time. The board generally meets once a year, and our meeting is scheduled for later this month. But I do know that half of the towns had signed it, and I'm not sure why. But and we didn't get all the questions answered from the insurance company side of the house, right?
No, I followed up again with Maya today.
I saw that
And,
traffic.
Their council is reviewing it. Several members, I'm assuming the Massachusetts members,
Yeah.
are Maya members. And so
So
advice to us would be advice to them.
So they asked some questions too.
They have some questions too. So I was hoping that at least by today I'd have some response back about specifically the indemnification and the concerns about 111F.
Mhm.
And so I don't have that yet.
47 departments reading it,
Yeah.
Vermont, Mass, and New Hampshire.
Beyond that,
I don't even remember the last time we signed it. Feel like
I don't believe that it's ever been signed in my tenure as fire chief.
No?
in my time,
I remember
we haven't seen
seeing it and discussing it before, but Again,
It's
I
been
don't
brought
know.
up from time to time. It is the only mechanism. It's one of the oldest mechanisms for departments from Massachusetts to cross the state line without the request for a intermunicipal agreement, between the states.
mhm.
It has helped us out. We took a task force from Franklin County up to Keene when they had their gas emergency 5 or 6 years ago.
Mhm.
And I want to say they had 100+ departments from all over New Hampshire, Vermont, and Massachusetts up there to help them out with that. We were the only Massachusetts contingent that actually made it across the border due to this mechanism.
I feel like I've seen Winchester down in Western Mass at
Yeah.
least, even if not in town.
So I know from DFS's standpoint, Department of Fire Services standpoint, you can have mutual aid agreements with cross-border towns as long as they're, the borders are touching. When you start reaching out further than that, it really enacts their legal team, brings in the EMAC requests, a lot more paperwork, has to go up the chain, down the chain. At some point in time, there was a large fire. I believe it was the Montague Plains back in the late 50s, early 60s that kind of drove this. And at one point in time, they were the dispatch center for all of, the county dispatch did control most of those membership towns. Some of them have joined. Some of them joined after the fact, or right around the same time for that mutual aid agreement.
Chief, correct me in my memory if it's wrong, but did we not benefit from this agreement? I know it was a few years back, but we had an incident at the paper mill with the bundles out back that required a large mutual aid response.
We had the
So
tanker task force and
yeah,
such.
so the tanker task force was actually a state resource.
Okay.
That's a fire mobilization thing that we use from the state. I do believe they were involved in the large brush fire, and I think they were at the Usher plant fire. I believe we used a lot of cross-border towns on that one. I was not here to speak on that one. I was deployed overseas at the time. But I do know we had a number of assets from all around
I
the
remember a
surrounding
lot,
areas.
and I also was involved in the Usher, and I remember.
That one, I was the
tremendous
chief
assets.
for the recycle yard fire, and we called the tanker task force in on that one.
Is there a timeline on signing this they were looking for?
The board of directors and the executive board were trying to get it signed as quick as possible, but I think they also understand that there was going to be some questions that came down from it. I did have a conversation with the president the other night at a retirement party here in the county for one of the chiefs that just retired, and told him that there were some concerns from the legal team. I don't think it's gonna hinder the mutual aid. We're still gonna respond, and I feel like they're still gonna respond over, but.
I feel like it's one of those agreements, as you noted, that's been around a long time and no one's looked at it in a while, and now someone's refreshed it because it made sense, and it's going to drive a lot of discussion before we get to potentially a cleaner, more modern copy.
Correct.
I know we had some questions outstanding with our council, and
Right.
obviously with Maya, we still don't have all those answers.
Correct.
Yeah, I believe the Maya questions were indemnification questions, right, or insurance carriers.
Specifically on the insurance, there's the liability piece, which is articulated within the draft agreement.
Mm-hmm.
So we just need to make sure that our coverage and every member is basically attesting that they will maintain that level of coverage. So that's for every member to insure. The next part is the 111F. If somebody is injured, say you respond and there's an injury, will the policy acknowledge injured on duty across state lines
Okay.
or in another community? And I think that's what they're researching. And I think that's a really important thing that we want to make sure is clear.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think that's the insurance piece that we're waiting on. In terms of council's concern, the question about indemnification, it's referenced, but it's not. It didn't seem to meet the legal framework that he would like to see. So council is willing to draft some recommended language to address that if we wanted it. But he already acknowledged that other communities or other districts may have proceeded with this version, and everybody's got to agree to the same language. So he didn't want to spend your resources working on that if that wasn't something you were concerned about. So that was an open question. Then the only other one was the question of dues. It refers to dues, but doesn't say what they are, and it doesn't say how they're set. And again, if you're not worried about it,
Do we pay dues?
What's that?
Do we pay dues?
Yes, we do.
I thought we
I can tell you
did, but
they haven't been increased. This is the first year we saw an increase. It was brought up by the board of directors through the executive board, and voted on, by the membership that shows up at the annual meeting.
it's, I mean, it's not significant.
No, I think it doubled, but they also added a training component to it, so it's $220 a year,
Yeah.
to be a member portion of this town, and they offer a lot of training.
Not to minimize it, but
No.
for what this gives us,
Yes.
it's not much of anything.
And
It probably doesn't pay for the one meeting.
no,
I was gonna say, there's a lot of value for that membership fee.
I agree wholeheartedly, but I do know there's some legal questions that need to be answered. And
Right.
the 111F coverage, I'm not sure, and I get that there's the question about, the state lines, but
Right.
and the indemnification portion, I know that's covered under the, the statewide agreement for the fire mold. I'm wondering if that language can't just be cleaned up, or if that's what we use. The thought process has always been that your people are covered under your insurance policy. So
Right.
the assumption is they're covered under 111F all the way across the boards. We have found out in the past that other activities we do outside of, the work of the fire
Mhm.
department are not covered under 111F. So it does warrant the conversation.
And I would assume if my issues and opinion on this in alignment with their coverage, all members who have the injured on duty coverage would
Mhm.
get the same directive who are in this
Mm.
agreement. So
If they don't, we have even more questions.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yes,
So whatever we get for guidance, I'm sure is going to be sent to all their members.
Mm.
I would hope so.
Yeah, I mean.
The
go
current
ahead.
agreement that we have, which is, 5 decades old, still active with an evergreen until this one is ratified?
As far as I know, yeah.
So it's,
I don't feel like anything's gonna change. The dues are gonna come out. The dues came out just the other day, so we paid them. I submitted the bill for them, but
no, I only asked that it goes to the timing of question of timing, that's
Right.
all.
Right.
Is that we're not without an agreement right now,
No.
we just haven't implemented the new one yet.
no, and they have. There's been towns that have. Obviously chiefs have changed. The information doesn't get passed along, so the dues don't get paid. And when I sat as the president of that organization at one point in time. You reach out to some of these chiefs, and they just didn't understand what the agreement was. And it truly is the agreement to allow the mutual aid to cross the borders. Other than that, you can send them a bill. When you delve down into the legality of it, if you're requesting us, but you're not a mutual aid partner of us, we can, there's some sort of mechanism to send you a bill, but obviously we don't because.
Yeah, I did find it interesting that there was no charges for anything except foam. So very specifically, you can charge for that in the agreement.
And that was a weird thing. And that was when we used. I think that was before the advent of the huge amounts
What?
of foam that we used to use.
Oh,
Prior
yeah,
to
before the-
whole PFAS thing and
Yeah.
all the way across the boards. But foam does get expensive, especially
know.
when you're buying the PFAS-free foam. The only thing that we've run into in the past that was hindersome is the Mass state laws are different for hazmat. So when we went up to New Hampshire, the charges for a response to a hazmat incident follow a different guideline in the state of New Hampshire. So.
I guess I tend towards if we are covered and able to continue to respond and, get response as needed today without signing this one, if we can clean some of that up since they're making the effort to do a fresh copy, it makes sense to me, I think, to have us go through that exercise. And I think my take on council and like indemnification and some of those other topics, you have a meeting coming up. I think some of these things, hopefully we have more info on by then, but maybe bringing them up and just saying, are they of interest to the group to clean up and issue a fresh copy or
Sure.
or not, to understand that before we invest any effort. Again, do we replicate something that's already out there? Do we, work with someone to draft it, or does someone else draft it? But all of that kind of is under the assumption that 47 communities want to go through that effort a second time if they've already started. So, I don't think our interests would preclude us from wanting to move this forward in some way. So, understanding that to do that with 47 communities is maybe a challenge to change language.
Right.
If there's nothing that we've experienced that has been hugely negative, which is what I'm hearing,
Yeah.
and the benefits surely outweigh anything that we're aware of, then, although I'd like to see it cleaned up if we can, if we can't reasonably, then maybe we can encourage doing it in the next 3 years, because it's a 3-year only, instead of an evergreen, it looked like.
Yes.
Yes, I believe they
This was
added that
identified
in.
as a 3-year.
Yep, so, and I would agree with some comment in there that 3 years is probably too short for an agreement of this scale, especially if the language got cleaned up. with
And
more
I
monitoring.
think they landed on that 3-year pause because mass, it takes a town vote to go anything over 3 years, correct? 3 or 5?
Yeah.
3.
3. Generally 3.
And I think that also puts it in front of them so it doesn't sit for another 25, 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
Where it sits there not gaining anything.
I mean, getting a new signature on an evergreen is about impossible, so I can see why it's going to have a term now. Every 3 might be a little much at some point, but cleanup might be needed for now. So I don't know, where do you guys want to land on that? Do you want to see how it goes? If you find that you need a signature sooner for some reason, bring it back let me know and we'll bring it back, but
I was going to say, if we're covered for now until we can get our concerns answered, I'm in favor of moving, holding as is for now, getting the answers we need, getting the revisions done. I have no compelling reason not to move forward with this once everything is cleaned up, but I don't see, other than the concerns issued by our legal.
I'll make the effort. Like I said, there was a number of towns that had already signed on to it, so I think most of them were member Franklin County towns also, so I would assume that they have Maya also, and
The only thing I was going to say is if there's a number that have already signed it, if they would be interested in having an addendum already. So sign it, because if you're asking them to sign a new document, they don't have to bring back the other one and void that vote and rescind it and do a new vote. They just,
I mean, if it's a board, they're going to be meeting to do it anyway. It may not be
True.
a big deal, but it's worth asking. That's an
yeah,
interesting,
I'll bring it forward and see
interesting question.
once they.
and it's really only about, the dues, I wouldn't care if it was, after hearing that conversation, it's a non-starter for me. And the insurance, that piece, it really wouldn't change anything. It's just the opinion that they give from Maya. It's not going to change any language in there.
Unless there's something in the policy that requires right.
language. But I'm erring on the side of our policy will cover it, and so therefore probably don't
We
need
hope.
the language. You would hope.
Right.
It's just the indemnification, which would be actual language change.
So to that point, council did not yet, because again, did not want to spend your resources on that, but are you interested in having council draft some language for chief to present to the other members for consideration?
Let's pull the other 46. Kidding.
Are you able to ask the question ahead of the meeting?
Yeah.
Like, because
Yeah, I can send it out.
I'm not so personally not so concerned about the resources to draft something, but why for anybody to spend the effort if no one's interested in having the conversation right now?
I can
It's just a
send
waste.
that out tomorrow.
Yeah.
All right.
Just to the what is it, board of 5, I think.
Yes. Well, yeah. There's 5 board of directors, and then the president, vice president, and secretary.
Yeah, I think if you just send it to the board and the,
Yeah.
and the executive officers, see if there's any interest.
Right. Are we concerned about whether we draft it or not if they are interested?
No, I'm
fine
not,
with it?
I'm not concerned with
Yeah.
that.
So, I mean, if the feedback is, yeah, they'd be interested in
We can offer it.
including it or seeing about it and reviewing some, then we can proceed with it.
Got it.
I know they engage in a legal team because there was some legal questions on employment. So I think it's an employment lawyer that they have, and I'm not sure. My assumption is that they engaged the legal team for Tri-State to help them with it because they did do a lot of cleanup. I think they shortened it up some too.
Okay. I would say also to add, you had noted that there are some indemnifications already in some mass agreements that work for mass. If you want to
Yeah, it's
grab
in
one
the-
of those,
in
if
the
we
State
do
Farm
move
Hall.
it forward and send one over to our council and say, here's a, if we can work from stock language that works for Mass already,
Yep.
maybe it's a lower lift or it's easy enough. We already know it's pretty,
Yep.
hopefully, a good start.
Thank you.
Okay.
Carry it to, I don't know if it'd be your next meeting. Your next meeting's a week from now.
No, not next meeting. Maybe,
Meeting after?
when's the,
I think it's the end of February.
yeah, let's say March, first March meeting.
First March meeting?
Yeah,
Okay.
unless there's something sooner, let us know.
Okay, I can
put it on
forward.
sooner, but yeah, first March meeting I think is the first non-budget meeting in March.
Got it. Okay.
And then switching hats, review and potential vote on a request to discharge mortgage for revolving housing loan fund. Civilian. Wonka.
My wife and I, and I don't remember the exact dates, but we applied for a loan to update the house when we first moved here to town. And then since we've done that revolving house loan fund changed along the way. And we have been, I believe it's 15 years, 10 or 15 years now, that they discharged, the mortgage automatically gets discharged. So we've lived here since we bought the house in 1997, and we've lived here that entire time with no intentions of leaving anytime soon. So we're just asking the request that the old loan follow the new loan guidance.
And just for clarity, the old loan was 0 interest, due in full at time of sale.
Correct.
And the new program, which changed more recently, was forgivable over time. Right?
It's like a
15 year.
year
It's a decreasing
decreases
principal
until you hit year
basically
15.
until either sale or the time expires.
Correct.
Yeah, and I believe it was 10. I think I want 15 years sticks in my head, but it's been a couple months since I've looked at it.
I think that's what the language was written.
But we've been there for. We've lived in the same house for 27 years. We purchased it our starter home, and it ended up being our retirement home.
And then we have I guess maybe not a policy, but just a statement on position on whether there's any terms or policy that applies to that decision from the Franklin County Regional Housing and Redevelopment Authority, which is basically the policy changed on new ones, but not ones at that time, and there are some hardship languages and policies, but it doesn't, that isn't the request or the situation here specifically.
Just for clarity, can you remind me on the new forgivable, is there a monthly payment that goes along with that? It is still,
It's the same terms.
it's the same exact terms. The only clause they changed was,
Yeah, I think it's the third paragraph in the statement from
yeah, I was
FHA,
reading that.
yeah.
It didn't,
So it's 0%. Originally, they were 0%, 100% due at time of title transfer. Current loans are 100% forgivable over a 15-year period. And you had said, I believe that's amortized over the 15 years. It's decreasing principal basically over the 15 years with no payment. Oh, there's no
With no
interest, no
payment.
payment.
that's what I want to make sure. That
Yep. I believe we had a similar question about this on a different one in the last few years.
Correct. Probably about 5 years ago.
Has it been that
4 or 5
long?
years, yeah. 4 or
Wow.
5 years ago, I think we were. You had a
Okay.
similar question.
And that one was around time of sale. I believe there was a request about forgiveness.
Oh, actually, no. To that one, that was about 2 years ago.
yeah.
Oh,
was-
okay. I
that
thought
was
that was more
relatively
recent.
new, yeah.
Okay. All right. All right.
We don't. These don't come up too often.
No. I'm not remembering the other one now. They don't come up often. Any questions, comments, thoughts?
Do we have policy or past practice in place as to how we've handled these or would handle them? Or is that something that would need to be drafted in order to do so?
So there's reference to a forgiveness policy, right? That's part of the whole 10-town loan thing, or that's not 10-town, but the
Mixed loan
rehab
programs.
loan program, right? Yeah, I know there's so many of them. And we're the lead town on so many of them.
Right.
The housing rehab revolving loan fund, there's a forgiveness policy, but that's nothing that you've conveyed yet, Phil, would fall under those policy pieces. And selling, forced to sell are some of those also parts of that usually.
Selectman's Loins question, the board has not adopted any policies beyond what HRA uses to administer programming, which you're entitled to do for your programs. But your predecessors
But we don't have
not
anything
done
in
that.
addition to what the HRA policy is today. That's the only
That's the
hardship
question.
forgiveness that exists.
Right.
That's the only one that exists that the town has, would be the default
Correct,
HRA
it's the
policy,
default.
because we don't have another one of our own.
Correct.
And to
And I
the
think
other part of
that's-
your question, the one that I can think of most recently, I believe we took no action on the request. So we did not do any forgiveness or adjustment.
You have a memo from Brian, who helps administer the program for you at HRA, and he alludes to the fact that the three of you could determine to institute some type of policy, but he wants you to consider the administrative research that needs to go into administering a revision or a change. And that hasn't been contemplated yet.
I think he also notes that, I think yours was from like 2002, sound right?
2002.
Back then it was 0%, 100% due at sale. Then there was a period in between then and more recently where it was 50% was
Mm-hmm.
forgiven over 15 years. The other 50% due at sale. And I believe the current program now
Right.
is 100% forgiven over 15 years. So it's kind of evolved over time.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I've, not this program, but I've been part of programs, unfortunately, where when you get into it, is the terms that, they may become more favorable later, unfortunately. It just is unfortunate.
I don't suppose you would have this recall, because I do not have it. I know we've gotten updates from, HRA on these. How many fall into each one of those categories
I don't have that.
That we have open from,
that we have open?
But
I was thinking of that too. Where do we sit with open loans today that fall under either any of the buckets?
The
right?
only reason I ask is in the letter, the guidance from Brian McHugh, it talks about as you forgive them, that pot of money becomes unavailable for future reinvestment. And just to take that into consideration, when we're making a decision on that of, how many of those are already going to go away anyways because of the new program. They're forgiven after 15. Some are forgiven in 50%, and some are not forgiven at all. And they're just due upon sale. So I'm just curious what those pockets of funds look like.
Okay.
And ultimately, if now they're the new plan is they're all forgivable, and that pot of money goes away anyways.
Mm-hmm.
If that was the plan.
At
then-
some point.
At some point.
Right.
Then, how do we look at those other handful? Is it 5? Is it 3? Is it
Right.
10? I don't know how many are in that, that had locked in earlier. I'm just curious what that looks like.
I can get that for you.
Yeah, I don't recall in the last update.
If I'm getting information from HRA, is there other data points that you would find helpful?
longevity of the program. If their if their funding source is already, if their new plan is already 100% forgivable after 15,
Say that again?
the
I'm sorry?
longevity of the program.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, I don't remember if we discussed that when the change came around, but I was thinking that at the time too. Don't remember discussing it.
If
so maybe we didn't
if
get
all of the
there.
new loans go in as 100% forgivable after 15 years, is it a finite program that ends,
Does it just
or are
end
they
after
gonna
that?
are they gonna replenish it with federal grant
Yeah.
funds? Are they gonna come to the towns? So just what's the future
Yeah.
plan of that fund? If it's just going to go away after a certain number of years anyways, that can lead to a different conversation about what you
course.
do with those older loans.
Yeah.
So I think those would be my two questions.
Okay.
And that would be it. Like I said, we benefited from this program personally. We had one of the older loans. We actually, for personal reasons, opted to pay it off before maturity of the loan. It's a tremendous benefit, and if it's not a regenerative pot of money from some revenue stream, as much as I would say, yeah, you can look at this and it makes sense that these people got a raw deal and we could do something to make them whole and fair, but at the expense of making this program no longer available for other young people or any people starting off with their first home or other thing. I'd like to know where the fund stands and what the
Okay.
consequences of any decisions or future policy we make acting on these, equitably, because we can't treat anything as a one-off. What we would do for one, we would have to be consistent, so.
Yeah, I lend to the same. I think no preference or for or against you, obviously, but
Sure, I
more of
understand.
it's a policy conversation, as you brought up, about what would we do with them, and if we're applying it, if we're considering making a change, then I think I'd want to know what's the outstanding amount that we're changing it against, because it's going to be broader than the one request. There's a note that it's 1.6 million in outstanding loans, back to 84. I have no idea if that's $1 million that are repaid at sale, or 200,000 that are, and all the other will be forgiven whenever the sale happens. So or in the next 15 years. Right. So there's just no quantifying that, and that's a big pot of money for future families who might need it, or housing, rehab. So. I don't have other questions for you to research, I think, beyond what's outstanding in what buckets.
Okay.
Actually, I changed that. There's a note about town policy.
Mhm.
Are there towns who have adopted any change, retroactive changes to those loans that are participating in this currently?
Okay.
If they are, samples of those language, just to understand what they might have done.
Got it.
Yeah, and anything about the longevity and sustainability of the plan forward. The program after the forgivable ones are gone.
Okay. I will research all that.
So, a lot of conversation, not an answer.
Understand.
I think you
Does
probably
op-
anticipated that, but
Does open up some
think we're-
questions. I just find it intriguing that they changed the guidance of the loans over the years.
I was not a rehab, but a new home buyer incentive program during a recession when we moved into town, and same kind of thing. It was repayable, and a few months later, and then the next calendar year, a friend of mine purchased a home, and it was fully forgiven. It was just a incentive, and I was like, okay. So it happens. I've seen it happen, but
I'm
so to be continued.
To
So
be
if you can
getting
gather it.
details on all the outstanding loans. I'm getting you policy examples, potentially.
Yep.
And I'm researching whether or not other towns have already enacted some form of a retroactive adjustment to those older loan styles. And what do those look like? And then getting you the answer to the viability of the loan fund if a change
What-
like this was to be enacted.
Well, also
Well,
some of
Just
that's
in the future when all the
yeah.
forgivable ones are forgiven, in theory.
the answer to the first question about the different pots of money will answer that last one as well. I mean, if
Right.
of the 1.6, if 1.3 are
Yeah.
in the,
Yeah.
you know, this older realm, then there's still a lot of viable money out there. If they've given out loans in the 15-year goes away, and that's at
Right.
your 1.3 million, and there's only 300,000 left of the other smaller ones like this, that's a whole different ballgame.
There's not a lot of longevity left.
Correct.
Well, and the
Just
other-
knowing what that landscape looks like.
The
matters.
other question I need to look into in your last round of loans that you've made over the last CDBG program, some of it was using money that had been repaid through other loans
Correct.
and issued into new loans, with the new loans issued with these terms. And so I need to understand that piece. So it wasn't necessarily a new funding source, it was the revolving loan fund. I just need to make sure.
I would confirm it, although this says it is, and I believe it was.
Yeah.
But all new ones
Right.
came out that way regardless of the funding source,
Right.
like recirculated money or new money.
Right.
Okay.
But it's worth knowing if that might be an incorrect assumption.
Okay.
Short answer is we'll have an answer soon.
Sure, we'll keep talking about it, at least for a little while. Obviously, we'll let you know, and then if we're getting ready to make a decision one way or another, we'll let you know to attend.
Come on back. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, did you guys want to discuss the EMS budgets or no? We're gonna wait for that on, I didn't check to see if that was open.
It was not on for tonight,
Okay,
no. But we do have, let me just to note it, right? The EMS numbers are finalized for both our EMS services that we pay for.
correct.
So Chief will send out those updated numbers, and then,
We'll add it into the budget update that we send to FinCom and select for next week.
yep. And Chief will be putting out a question about whether the groups want to do a session to discuss the changes in the EMS regionalization work that we've been doing with Northfield and Gill and Bernstein, or if it's just more of finalizing the numbers and sending around the information, so we can schedule it accordingly. I think that was it, right, Chief? Did I miss one?
Yeah, pretty much. Other than once we
Oh.
get the IMA questions answered, that'll be in front of you guys also.
So the draft IMI came out Friday.
Yes.
Yes.
So we're going to get that to council for review and then get it in front of the three of you.
Need that. If you can let them know, I need it in like the next week or two. Feedback, please.
Tomorrow.
I don't need the answers tomorrow, but we need feedback within the next week or two because we'll be discussing it later in the month
Absolutely.
with the EMS team. So, and Chief's budget we missed in the narrative because we were having some of the narrative issues. I think that there was a piece to the budget there that wasn't in the budget. It was in the narrative, which we didn't discuss. So
I'm going
I recommend we probably bring it back on the 24th.
I'm going to comb through all the narratives and see if there's anything that was missing and then call attention to that so that FinCom and Select Board can go back and check those narratives.
I think it's something to discuss next week at our joint meeting. Well, not to bring them back, but to discuss when to bring them back and if we
Right.
need to.
Right.
Probably on the 24th or in a future meeting beyond that. All right. Good enough, Chief.
Okay,
Thank you, sir.
thank you.
Recovery. Let's continue from where we are. Review a letter of intention to retire for Paula Betters. So we have a firm date,
Yes.
July 18th,
July 18th.
2025.
Correct.
So we have some notice, but not a ton.
The clock is ticking.
The clock is ticking. Okay.
So Brian and I, Brian's suggestion, did meet with Paula, 2 weeks ago now?
I believe that's correct.
To discuss this, and at Brian's recommendation or directive to put this letter in draft to submit so that we knew, and so that we could start planning accordingly. The rest of the meeting focused on the way the center and our services to the senior community have evolved over her time, and what the future might look like, and any potential amendments or changes to the job description, to address some of the expectations of where we as a town and as a community would like to see those services continue or modify or improve, some of the barriers we might be up against to accomplish those types of things. But I'd say all in all, it was a very productive meeting, a good use of time, with a lot of good information exchanged. Obviously, Paula has put her heart and soul into this, and I think it goes without saying we appreciate the dedication that she's given to the town and our this center and the community that benefits from it.
Agreed.
So, that being said, Brian, would you like to address the memo that
Sure.
put forward and next steps?
So, this was a position that you all hired for before I joined you, so I'm not as familiar with what your previous search process looked like. I just know what the records show me. The position description that I've included is the last time that the position description was updated, so it's been a decade. To Selectman Loyne's point, we've asked Director Betters to provide us some thoughts on the existing position description and some suggested edits. And so I will follow back up with her and ask for the status of that feedback. I did put some notes into the memo about some of the changing demographics, not only for Erving, but just in general. Franklin County has seen an increase in the population that would identify as senior. And to Selectman Loyne's point, the services that are sought today may be slightly or significantly different than what they were maybe anticipated to be 15 years ago. You also were just launching this facility. It was brand new. It's now been open for over a decade. And so I think this is a great opportunity for the three of you to have a vision session about what you are looking for in your service for the next decade. What does that look like in terms of the position description and the advertisement materials that were about the issue in terms of the candidate that you're seeking? So I appreciate Director Betters giving us 6 months notice that this is happening so that we can plan accordingly, but to the point you all discussed, that 6 months will go by quickly. I think our goal would be, and I would encourage you to leave a little runway in case the first search doesn't pan out the way we hope. But I would like to start advertising in March, have a screening committee assembled by March, give a deadline in April for those materials to be delivered so that the screening committee can begin their work, with the goal of having final interviews by the end of April, beginning of May. I know that puts us around town meeting time, but if the select board has an opportunity to meet with finalists, and if the first search goes well and we don't need a second round, make your selection. That would give us the opportunity to have a candidate give notice somewhere else and hopefully join us by June, and it provides you with about a month of overlap.
I don't think any of us were here on that one. I think that happened before me as well. I think we adjusted or finalized the job description after
It's possible.
screening was completed and hiring.
Right.
I don't recall when Paula started, but I think she took
I think it was 2015.
the position before I took office.
I think so.
I remember.
You came in that July or something.
I think it was just
May.
it was kind of similar to you and Brian, but I don't think joining us. But I don't think It was while I was on, I think I was on the finance committee at the time.
I remember doing property checks during the construction, but that was the extent of my involvement.
So you mentioned Director Better's looking over the job description, making recommendations. That hasn't
Correct.
happened yet. We're expecting that, anticipating
She's
that.
been working on it for a few weeks.
That's what I
just
thought.
need to see if she's done with her recommended edits and then get them to the three of you for review.
And one of the things that sort of recurred was the change in services was, and I say this somewhat optimistically, is we have a younger senior community, if not maybe more vibrant, and the types of folks that are not coming here to spend an entire day, but they will target a particular service, a particular class or a craft, and they're in and they're out and they're on to the next thing. Or and then there's the other end of the spectrum with there's a part of our community that are more homebound, cloistered, and where there seems to be a lack of services going to them, and need to find out what it is that would perhaps be lacking and how we could better serve the needs that they have. Those were the two major themes that were brought up in our discussion that we would want to look at and consider, and I'm very interested to see what Director Better's feedback is. There we go. Thank you. Old dogs can be tough.
I was having this conversation with someone else recently, and the rebranding of senior centers and things like that, and centers for active living was one of the terms that had been brought up, and like that the demographic in age, but also in what that people are looking for and interested in and wanting to see offered is widely different than we might have thought,
Right.
or I would have thought 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So.
Well, and even
So-
in the last month, the Department of Elder Affairs, who you all met with last week, has rebranded to be the Department of Aging and Independence.
There
So
you
I
go.
think even on the state level, they're acknowledging that there's a shift in branding and shift in thought about
Right.
this population and the services they need or the way they want to be talked about. And maybe we align with some of that. Maybe it's not necessary. But I do think it's worth the three of you having that conversation.
Director Betters has brought a different perspective to here and to the new center than I think maybe what was there before, from what I've heard and seen, and so I think at least incorporating some of that wisdom and success that she's had into how we're looking forward is good.
Absolutely.
So next steps, I think, raised good questions. Timeline, I think, we can look at finalizing job description. We can edits our own as well as input from the director. Timeline, I mean, part of me would love to see it even sooner just from the sake of having some overlap, but I understand there's a lot going on and that's probably unrealistic. And we want to do the position justice, so we do want to, spend the right amount of time on adjustments and clarity on what we're looking for and what the job description should be, so. Does it make sense to bring this back in our next non-budget meeting? Take a look at the job description, talk about the screening committee piece at that time?
Yeah, I had some comments that I'll reach out to either Director Betters or even through Selectman Loyne as a liaison, just related to the job description and the functions of how we can enhance it. And I'm sure, I don't want to jump the gun and start throwing them all out there now, because I would, if I'm a betting man, they're already in there if Paul has had her hands on looking at it. So I would assume that there's been some liberty in adjusting that into the current expansive role that it is, as opposed to what this says from 2015. So I'll wait to see some of those, but we can chat offline about some of those. I'll send you an email of the potential edits or thoughts on
Sure.
those.
Do do either of you know when she anticipates having that done? Her edits?
I will follow up with her tomorrow morning.
I mean, if we could have them by the end of the week, that would give us
Yep.
next week to kind of look it over and provide any kind of feedback, or have some time to compare them as, and incorporate
yeah.
our thoughts too before we talk about it
Yeah.
again. That would be ideal.
Mm.
Give us an
I've-
opportunity, because I don't want to redo
No.
what she's already going to incorporate
good
probably
idea.
a lot of.
Yeah.
No, I had been revisiting it in my head, but I know how busy and how much energy she was putting into the meeting we had last week regarding the housing and everything.
Yeah.
So I wanted to give her some time, but
Yeah.
Understood.
I think, by the end of this week, if that's
reasonable.
possible, that would be great.
Okay. And further edits can come too. So of course,
Absolutely.
if it's missing something, but
No, I was just going
Gives
to
us a
say,
starting point.
enhancing on one of the essential functions is the liaison to the town's rec commission and the library board of trustees. It goes to, I think we already have a shift, as you talked about, with a younger senior community center that's being
Mhm.
utilized. The patrons are of a younger senior age, but also that lends itself directly to the idea that it's more than just the Council of Aging Senior Center. It's also a community center used for varying activities, and in conjunction with, I think this is a perfect opportunity to sort of enhance that sort of delineation between how do you bridge that gap, and not losing focus on the senior capacity, the senior programming, and how expansive that is and has grown. If it's not doubled or tripled since she took over, I'd be surprised. But also not losing focus on still folding in some of the other community stuff that we can with those other departments in town. And it doesn't mean that that director has to take the lion's share of that lead, but can be a co-facilitator making some of that happen. So that was one of my thoughts on, let's see where we can fold that in.
yeah, there's some comment about incorporating some collaboration with the elementary school as well. That
Yeah.
was kind of resurfacing.
Yep.
And that's another one where,
Yep.
bringing the different generations and the different groups together in different ways. So,
And I had a few minor edits, comments, questions that we can hold until a different time, because Scott, I agree with you, and I'm not a betting man because I know I'd lose if I bet against Paula.
I'm not betting against Paula. Absolutely not.
But one of the other things that I think we need to consider is how the role and the activity around this center is going to change with a portion of that community, whether it's multi-generational with younger, or the designated housing for seniors, with them having more direct access, literally within walking distance.
Yep.
There could be an increase in programming or a call for services, and I think we have to
Excellent.
be
Good
prepared
point.
for that too.
So for, I think it might be around the 20th, our next non-budget meeting, we'll plan to bring comments and adjustments on the job description. We should have recommendations from the current director as well. Commentary or anything on the screening committee
Yep.
piece. If you want, unless you think it's preemptive, we can have Brian put out the word for anyone who's interested in serving on the screening
I
for it.
don't think it's preemptive. I think we should
Yeah.
get people thinking
it
about
out.
it
The
now.
general
but
outline I put in the memo is okay for thought.
Timeline wise,
Yeah.
I think it's as close to it as we're going to get tonight.
We're looking for like a 7-member board. That idea?
I think we'll finalize it. Give us a moment to kind of think
Yep.
it over. I think directionally, we'll firm that up in the next meeting most likely.
Okay.
I do think we need to put it on people's radar and start
Mhm.
getting that going.
Agreed. I think put out what you have now, just with the caveat that obviously we're working on the job description. We reserve the right to change that makeup if we want to, but right now, it's a starting place, and I appreciate you putting it together for us.
Okay.
And that we do want to, we know a lot going on, but we also don't want to delay. So
Right.
definitely will be in March, April, May, maybe June, if it's not successful.
Right.
Commitment.
Right.
In the first round.
Okay.
Make sense? Any other needs or requests for the next review of this?
No.
Just put it out to the general community what the commissioner and the people said about what a lovely center this is and how
They
many
also do.
people would
Yeah. It's a lot of compliments. A lot of
Yeah.
compliments from the,
be a great place for the right person to
absolutely.
seize the opportunity, so.
Absolutely.
Oh, it'll be a new chapter, especially with housing and such, potentially coming, so it's exciting.
Great
Sad
opportunity for the right
sad to see the
person.
change in some ways, but
Yeah.
a great opportunity for somebody.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll carry that to our next non-budget meeting.
Thank you.
Sticking on the staffing side, I'm going to circle back and review and potential appointment of the town planner. So we met last week for our third of many meetings and held the interview. We're kind of all on the same page, consensus there with being interested in moving forward with the candidate. And so that brings us to tonight. So you and Scott have worked on that in the interim.
Yeah, so my schedule was not going to lend us to do a three-person meeting. So Brian had offered and I accepted. He and I chatted about where my stance was and what we were, planning on doing. He reached out to Glenn. There was some back and forth with them via email, follow-up phone calls, and in between those, emails and phone calls with me, and we played phone tag and got through there, and we got to a place where we can make an offer and they'll be willing to accept. And there was some back and forth about time off.
Mm-hmm.
And there's I think the FERCog has some language that allows for qualifying agencies, if you've had previous experience in qualifying agencies and years of service, there's mechanisms to honor that as far as time off. We do a similar stance here when we talk about pay. And
Right.
we
Placement
move
sometimes.
Placement on the scale. This would be a discussion. There was a request or an ask about placement on how much time off somebody would be able to come in with. So what I said and what Brian had relayed was it's a board's decision. We would have to talk about that. My stance is I'm not a huge fan of doing a lot of one-off accommodations. I would much rather look at it holistically of what is our stance as a town. Do we want to make a policy change that says we have this ability to honor this? Are there examples out there? A very similar conversation that we just had a few minutes ago. But with, so clearly there's a thread that happens when we have these conversations that we like to have something solid, a foundation, language that we can fall back on.
Sustainable.
Yeah.
Beyond our time.
Beyond our time. And Glenn had said he was amenable to that. Just the fact that we'd be willing to look at it.
So no commitment to do anything per se, but we would be, potentially willing to entertain the question,
The question
And consider
any
what that
potential
might be.
solutions
Sure.
and knowing that
but not contingent on
correct.
an offer. Okay.
Willing to accept an offer without that. Just happy that we're willing to actually engage in that conversation. We did go. We had mentioned before we broke in our last meeting that we were definitely going to be flexible with time frame of starting. And given the nature of his current employment and the needs of that employment, long story short, we ended on a March 31st. It allows him enough time to give his current employer plenty of leave notice, as well as there was prior commitments that he had already had ready to go at the tail end of March. So rather than hiring and trying to figure out how do you work in 1 or 2 days, take some days off in your first 2 weeks of an employment, it just made sense to move it back a couple more weeks. The real question I asked was with Brian is, what does that do for you? Because he's ultimately still filling that void until
Correct.
somebody is hired. So he understood, was okay with it. An additional 2 weeks to accommodate a new employee is not by any stretch a deal breaker.
Understood.
So that's where we got.
Questions, concerns?
No, it all makes sense to me, and I certainly appreciate people don't necessarily have a crystal ball and say, I think I'm going to apply for a new job and change when they have travel plans or other commitments. So I think that makes all the sense in the world. If Brian can maintain and, keep the lights on for an extra 2 weeks, then I'm okay with that arrangement. So,
Would one of you like to make a motion?
I was
Sure,
going to say,
I'll read it.
go
I'll
ahead.
make a motion to appoint Glenn Johnson Masad to the full-time benefited position of town planner with a 1-year probationary period pending successful completion of a pre-employment query check and medical screening at a rate of grade F, step 3, in accordance with the general government compensation schedule and with a start date on or before March 31st, 2025.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Review of meeting minutes. We have February 7th, 2022.
Do you want to do them together or separate? They both predate.
Yeah, we'll do them together on February 13th, 2023.
Make a
The
motion to
February
approve
thread.
February 7th, 2022 and February 13th of 2023 as written.
I will second that. Any discussion?
None.
None. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I will
Abstain?
abstain from voting, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Review of sergeant's commendations for Officer Waldron and Officer Garvey, and then for Officer Bryant and CSO co-responder Brooks.
Feeling up to it?
I will do one for sure. If one of you would like to take another, no problem with that either. Up to you guys.
I'm happy to take one if
Okay, sure.
Perfect.
Do you have a preference on which one, first or second?
no preference.
All right, well, I'll start us off then. So, first letter of commendation here from Sergeant Pecos for Officer Waldron and Officer Garvey. On December 23rd, 2024, at 4:23 p.m., Officers Brandon Garvey and Mitchell Waldron, assigned to Cruiser 11C2, had just cleared a traffic stop near the French King Bridge when they encountered a distraught individual on the sidewalk of the bridge. The temperature of the time was approximately 16 degrees. The officers exited the cruiser, engaged in conversation, and confirmed their suspicions regarding the person's state of distress. Through their compassionate and skilled communication, the officers determined that the individual had recently experienced significant personal trauma and was on the bridge with the intent of ending their life. While Officer Garvey and Waldron were interacting with the individual and ensuring her safety in their cruiser, the Northampton Police Department received a call from the individual's friend. The friend reported receiving a text message earlier in the day indicating the individual's intent to harm herself and specify a bridge as the location. Northampton Police began searching bridges in their jurisdiction and used phone location data, which placed the individual at the French King Bridge. Shelburne Control dispatchers subsequently inquired about the identity of the person Officer Garvey and Waldron were assisting. They confirmed it was the same individual. Already secure in the back of the cruiser, the officers ensured the individual was transported to appropriate services for further care. Officers Garvey and Waldron's keen observations, swift actions, and compassionate response resulted directly in saving a life. Their actions exemplify the highest standards of our department and reflect the training and experience we value in our officers, who too often face calls of this nature. Respectively recommend that this commendation be added to their permanent personnel file as a record of their exceptional service. Respectfully, Sergeant Pecos, Erving Police Department.
Excellent.
I thank them every day for all their work, and especially days like this.
Is there a motion to add this to the personnel file?
Yes. I will make a motion that we add this commendation to Officer Brandon Garvey and Officer Mitchell Waldron's personnel files.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim, take the second.
This letter is addressed Chief and Select Board on November 14th, 2024 at 8:54 p.m. Officer Brandon Bryant and CSO3 Jessica Brooks responded to the responded to the French King Bridge following a report of a suicidal female. The report came from the individual's husband, who informed dispatchers of his wife's intentions. Using the Find My Phone app, he was able to locate her at the French King Bridge. Officer Bryant and CSO3 Brooks promptly arrived at the bridge and found the individual parked in her vehicle. It should be noted that CSO3 Brooks was at the station but not on duty at the time. She heard the radio transmission and chose to respond out of the nature and severity of the call. While communicating with the female at the bridge, it became evident that she was preparing to end her life. During the conversation, her demeanor then suddenly and noticeably changed as she began to experience a medical emergency. Recognizing the severity of the situation, Officer Bryan and CSO3 Brooks immediately activated Advanced Life Support, ALS, services and ensured the individual received the appropriate emergency care, ultimately saving her life. Their timely response, keen observations, and ability to identify not only the individual's mental health crisis, but also her sudden medical emergency reflect the higher standards of our department. Their actions highlight the critical training and professionalism we rely on in our officers, who frequently handle situations of this nature. I respectfully recommend that this commendation be added to their permanent personnel files as a record of their exceptional service. I would also recommend that this letter be forwarded to CSO to be added to CSO3 Brooks's employment records with her agency. Respectfully, Sergeant Adam Pecos, Erving Police Department. And to echo your words, Chairman, I will also recognize this effort that our officers and our CSO partners put forth on behalf of our community on a daily basis. I will make the motion to add these commendation letters to their personnel files, as well as motioning that we do forward a copy of this letter to CSO to be added to CSO Brooks's employment records within her own agency.
Second that.
Yep.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you, and thank you to Sergeant for recognizing their actions. Review of request from Verizon Fios broadband expansion, or a letter of support.
I've still not received a response.
So this request came across Brian's desk, and he had sent it my way. Him and I discussed it briefly when it came in, and I noted wanting to get some details on what were they going to do in kind of firm and finite plans should they be successful in having our support in doing it, to ensure that if we do support it, we had some clear expectations on what we were getting out of that partner for that effort and that endorsement, right? So have not heard back.
No.
Did want to put it in front of all of you so you knew it was out there. Again, it's not, it's our decision whether or not to offer a letter of support or wait to hear back first or not. But I wanted to put it out in front of you all. I personally think diversity and variety in our broadband providers would be great for competitive reasons for our, for our citizens, et cetera. But I also think it's important that if we're supporting it, we know that they are going to deploy and build out infrastructure that is meaningful for that support. So, but I leave it to both of you if you wish to take any action before we hear back.
So I did read in the letter that they sent, they have a deadline of February 10th. what is the likelihood we will get a response from them and we could
Their
act on this?
application's due February 28th. They want our letter February 10th so
Right.
that they can assemble. I would respond back. First of all, if the three of you are willing to even discuss this on February 10th, I know you have a budget hearing scheduled. If this is one of the items you're willing to discuss ahead of time, I can respond one more time to them and say if they seriously want the select board's consideration, I need an answer by this Wednesday with their explanation of what the proposal is so that you can review it in time for the 10th. And I'm happy to draft it, finalize it on the 10th if you're willing to issue it, and you can sign it that night and I can send it over. So we'll meet it that evening, but they're asking something from the three of you. So
Right.
I don't think it's unreasonable for them to provide you with the answers as to what you're being asked to sign on to.
That's where I was going with this, and obviously the chair will set our agenda if you're willing to entertain it. I agree with you. This could be a tremendous opportunity for our community to have options to choose from. But I'd like to know what I'm endorsing before I endorse it. So
Right.
if they'd like our signature, we'd like their answers, is what I'll say. I would like their answers.
You can
Not-
speak for me. I would say the same thing.
Okay. I figured
I-
the three of you would feel
Yeah.
that way.
It's hard to endorse something on a very high level without hearing actually any substance of the actual ask.
Agree.
I think the sentence for me was, in the first opening paragraph of their sample letter, pleased that Verizon plans to expand their fiber optic network and facilitate broadband for unserved and underserved residents and businesses. What does that mean on a map?
Right.
Be specific. Are you going to lay out fiber across the whole town and to all of our constituents? To some? To which ones?
Right.
What does that mean? So I guess I would only say I have no problem adding to the agenda for the 10th, should they respond, for us to have a chance to review and potentially support it, because I agree. Could be very, very good to have some competition and options. That presumes we get a response.
Right.
I'll carry it on there likely if we have other business, even if we don't, so there's still an opportunity to make a decision. Anything you want specifically answered beyond what I already asked, or we can add to the reminder, is my only other ask to you two. I think that summarize briefly what I had you
Mhm.
convey, was basically who and where are you building this out to cover?
And if it's in phases, what are the phases?
Yep, that's right. So that was the original question.
No, I think that
Covers
covers
it.
it.
For
That
me.
covers it? All
So if
right.
I tell them that we need an answer by Wednesday, so that you have the weekend to review whatever they send over,
Yeah, I have to imagine they already have those,
have to.
those plans laid out,
I would think
at
so.
least on a high level.
Okay.
It's phased or it's not. I mean, whether it is and exactly how, maybe they don't have that defined, but what is it? What is your plan? There's a plan behind this. You're asking for money for something.
Right.
So,
So carried in next week?
Yeah.
Okay.
please.
Thank you.
And we'll see an answer in the packet, or we won't, and we'll go from there. Review and approval of the treasury warrant. I'll make a motion to approve the 16th accounts payable warrant for fiscal year 2025, an aggregate amount of $104,479.40.
Second?
Any discussion?
None.
All in favor?
All right?
Aye. Any other business? I know I jumped around. Did I miss anything?
No, you got it all.
Okay.
I think we're good.
We are here next week, 7 o'clock, education budget. We'll also talk a little bit about some of the project stuff, capital, and next requests that they have related to that for the elementary school. Tentatively 6:30 for any board business, such as the last item that we have, but I'll adjust accordingly based on what we have by then. Any other items for tonight?
Actually, can I ask you one question?
You shook your head no.
I'm so sorry. Because he's
Of
ready
course.
and I'm ready too.
Of course, he's like
just-
power off.
I just want this, your preference on this topic. So typically at this point in the year, we stop advertising elected official vacancies. We have a remaining vacancy on the Board of Assessors. We have a remaining vacancy on the Board of Health. And I typically stop because the town clerk advertises vacancies.
To take out papers.
Right.
Right, to actually
And we
run.
don't want to confuse the two processes. With that being said, concerns have been expressed, not that anybody's come forward for those 2 seats, but just concerns that 5 more months until July 1st, waiting to have somebody take that is a long period of time. So I've been asked if you all are okay with me putting out one more attempt at trying to advertise those vacancies and see if somebody wants to fill those seats just for the remainder of this fiscal year. And I just said I didn't feel like it was right for me to advertise them and potentially muddy that process, but I would ask the 3 of you.
When are papers due?
March
15th?
March
17th?
17th.
Okay, thank you. I was thinking it was around mid-March. I mean, now that start is July 1, it is a longer period in between.
Right.
But I don't want to get into the conundrum of someone shows interest, gets appointed, but is past the date to pull papers and isn't reelected. Now what? Like, how does that? Are we putting them in for a different term and longer
Right.
term? I guess a little confusing, I think. Given. I
You know what,
would
though, that's not a bad spot to be in, just to have somebody in the door, even if we have to figure out the
the logistics after.
logistics
No,
after
I
the
understand.
fact.
I almost. I mean, I'm not opposed to doing it.
Okay.
Before March 17th.
Yeah, I mean, after
I
that,
think at March 17th, if someone runs and is elected, we could appoint them. We could talk to them and appoint them after annual town meeting, after the elections,
True.
for the remainder of the year, because it's a vacancy.
correct.
And I would rather approach it that way, and if no one is elected, then we can re-advertise in May. Because
Yeah.
it's an open seat,
I think just
right?
being very clear that this advertisement for an opening is strictly until June 30th. And this is very clearly just a short-term interim to get us through this last part.
Right. Okay.
And if you should be interested and be appointed until then, you should, if you so wish to continue, pull papers as well, concurrently, right?
Okay. You're okay with me proceeding?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
That was it.
Okay. That was easy. All right, with that, a motion to adjourn, 7:57.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.